Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here with you today. My name is Brody Bueller, and I'm the Global Managing Director of Accenture's Post and Parcel business. Part of my role within Accenture is to try and see the future and try and understand what's going on in the delivery sector in specific. And so what we're going to walk through today is some research that we've been doing for the last 10 years. The new research report is just releasing today, and we're going to walk through some of the insights that we've seen from that. As we look at this, the role that we're trying to play, or the role that we have this research playing, is to understand before our clients need to ask the question, what questions they're going to be asking and where they need to move. And so we're then can position Accenture's investment in that space. So that's my role, and that's this research, and that's what we're here to show you today. So what you see here is what we call the delivery reality. Nothing special about this curve. I think everybody in this room would agree that as speed and personalization increases, cost increases. We're seeing a lot of pressure on this curve, a lot of potential for disruption of this curve, and it's coming from four specific areas. The first is consumer expectations and how consumer behavior is changing. The second is how e-tailers are repositioning their competitive proposition. The third is around venture-funded startups that are entering this space and trying to change the models. And the last is around technology and how technology can alter, reshape this curve, if you will. And so the rest of my presentation will center around those four areas and trying to prove to you that this curve may be becoming obsolete. So let's start with consumers. Consumer expectations are starting to shift fairly radically, primarily driven by what we're seeing with smartphone adoption. And smartphones radically change the way that consumers can interact in two ways. The first is with information and data, and they have near instant access to that information. And we're seeing that play through in mobile shopping. A 10x year-over-year increase this year in the amount of time that consumers are spending on their phone shopping from a mobile experience. The second is around commerce and buying online. And in that instance, we're seeing about a doubling each year, and we expect that mobile e-commerce will be about half of all e-commerce by 2019. There's something interesting in that data, however. If you look at a 10x increase in mobile shopping, but almost only a 2x increase in the amount that they're buying, that means there's a lot of friction in that transaction right now. And we expect that friction will start to come out over the next couple of years as consumer expectations continue to push toward that mobile in-control experience that Patrick talked about. So how is this changing what consumers are doing? There are a few areas that we're seeing changed behavior. The first is the distance between the advertisement and the purchase is shrinking considerably. If you think back to how it used to be, you'd see an ad, and then later that day or the next day or sometime that week, perhaps, you would go and make the purchase. Today, that distance is measured in seconds. I can be watching an ad on TV, Shazam it, and next thing you know, I've made a purchase. I get an ad on my phone, I can click the button, and I've made a purchase. So the distance between advertising and the information about the product and the actual commerce event is shrinking dramatically. We're seeing a significant increase in the number of SKUs, online in particular. And this is in contrast to the reduction of SKUs that we're seeing in brick and mortar. So this last year, we saw about a 15 to 50% increase in SKUs that are available online. And that is changing consumer behavior in that they expect to be able to get anything they want at any time. The third is around this next day free phenomena that's being pushed through the industry, as that's becoming the expectation, is that I can get it very quickly and I don't pay for shipping. And as you look at these changing behaviors, what we're seeing is that the final is around the way that I get the delivery options playing out, and new ways of receiving the goods as consumers are less interested in having it predefined and more interested in having the control of that delivery experience. Consumers then start to want this anytime, anywhere, anyway, completely in control. And those mobile shoppers in particular have a very different expectation of shipping. They expect that shipping event to be just as mobile as was the purchase that they made. They're also starting to bring together the brands of the shipping and retailing industry. And so one of the things that we're finding is that 86% of consumers this year say that the delivery experience is part of the online purchase experience. When they bring those two experiences together, it's important then for the brand to have the right sort of a delivery experience. And we see is that about a third of consumers are unhappy with the delivery experience they're receiving today, and about 70% of them are deciding whether to repeat purchase based on that delivery experience. What all this means is that the shipping event, the delivery event, has become the second half of a digital consumer experience for the retailers, and it's becoming more and more important that those experiences be coordinated and combined and the integration be there. So now as we switch to retailers, how they're adapting to this, we're seeing that they're changing their competitive models. And when online shopping or e-commerce first came out, often the competition was around price. But what we've seen is that that's commoditized, and with price matching, the ability to have very good intel about how your competitors are pricing, that the move then shifted to a free shipping event. We all know the phenomena that Amazon drove there of bringing free shipping to the market that created a new expectation. That then commoditized, so we're seeing a lot of investment in fast and improving the speed. And you saw in some of Patrick's slides how next day and even same day is starting to take effect. We believe that the next round of competitive advantage in retail specifically is going to come from free and fast, and we're seeing a lot of investment in that right now, and then ultimately the control. As those consumers expect convenience and they expect an experience, and those two, convenience and experience, start to change that model that we showed right at the beginning, that curve. Four things that we're seeing that are really having a transformative effect within retail. Inventory proximity, as investments are made to bring the inventory closer, and that's those investments, whether you look at Amazon with distribution centers, they'll soon have 16 here in the UK, 47 in the US. They're building distribution centers everywhere closer to the consumer, or a ship from store sort of model where you're using brick and mortar as the base for a local delivery hub. That inventory proximity is all about cost and speed. The second is investment in new delivery options, the ability to receive the delivery wherever and however you want. What we found as we did research is that there's a millennial, urban, professional consumer that isn't interested in a doorstep delivery, and they're demanding these sorts of options. As those options play out, we're seeing barriers to e-commerce fall and an acceleration in that segment in particular as these new options are available. Third is around consumer intimacy. When we did this research, surveyed chief marketing officers at hundreds of companies and asked the question of what is the strategic priority of the consumer. In 2012, about 36% said they expected to compete as a strategic priority on the consumer. When we did this research last year, it was 89% said that investment, that intimacy with the consumer is going to be their strategic advantage. And as more and more data is captured and then used to better predict consumer behavior, we're seeing a lot of investment in understanding the when and the where and how to stage to make that consumer happy. And finally, the elimination of the impediments to cross-border shipping. As Patrick said, we're seeing that grow fairly rapidly as you eliminate payment capabilities and language impediments and customs impediments. We're seeing that cross-border is becoming a much more important. So what does that all mean? One of the things that we're seeing in the post and parcel industry in particular is what we're calling the polarizing of delivery. Increased importance of having a cross-border multinational network and the ability to deliver goods everywhere in the world, and an increased importance on that local last mile network, right? 21% growth in that local last mile, but a much lower importance on the end-to-end, the domestic end-to-end network, 25% reduction in utilization. This polarization is changing the prioritization that we're seeing and the levels of investments that we're seeing in the market. So when you look at this, localization and the ability to interact with cross-border partners, one of the things that we found is that venture capitalists have taken a keen interest in what's going on. And as you think about why, an inefficient market that's growing quickly, that is very localized, is something that they feel that they can do in a very different way. And so, radical increase from 2013, you see the investment in this sector was about $266 million. To the first quarter of this year, it was, or last year, excuse me, $1.75 billion, and we estimate that for the entirety of 2006, it was about $2.7 billion. So a 10x increase in the amount of venture capital flowing into this sector as these companies look at this and say, we can create a different model. We can do this differently, and if we can do this differently, we can really radically change the shape of that curve of the cost to speed and personalization. In response to this significant entrance of venture capitalists, we're seeing that the incumbents are also radically increasing their investment, up 40% over the last couple of years. Those investments are centered around building out capabilities and capacity, and you talk about the difference in average volume to peak year over year. It increases every year. You think you have it bad here, look at what happens on Singles Day in China. Average volume flowing through the China network, which is Alibaba's delivery subsidiary, is about 57 million pieces a day. On Singles Day, just one day, November 11th of last year, 580 million parcels to deliver. That's the difference between the average and the peak, and one of the things that we're finding is the incumbents are investing in being able to accommodate these significant spikes in the peak and to do it in very different ways. They're also investing in new capabilities and giving the consumers, adjusting to those changes in consumer behaviors and giving consumers what they're looking for. So what does all this mean? What we are seeing is this convergence of three very different parties into what we're calling the last mile battlefield. And they're approaching it in very different ways. So you've got retailers entering, and they've got a lot of customer data. They know a lot about the consumer, and they believe that they can create a more personalized delivery experience, and investing in not just deliver their own, but in coming up with new models and in encouraging new models that change the slope of that curve. You've got startups that are looking at it and saying, we can deliver in a very different cost profile than the incumbents, and they all are doing it roughly the same way. They are asset light, information rich. And those asset light models allow them to be very agile and to be very cost efficient and to do things in very different ways. And they believe that they can create a faster, more personalized delivery at the same cost points that exist today from the incumbents. And then the last, we have the traditional model. Those traditional players are looking at their network, this big fixed cost, fixed capacity network generally that they have, and looking at that as an asset as they work on increasing density and improving density in their last mile operations, and using that asset as a way to try and bend the slope of that curve. So all of this then turns to where do we go next, and that's where we think technology is going to have an incredible impact over the next couple of years. And this is looking out a few years on the horizon. There's three that we want to talk about. The first is what we're seeing with artificial intelligence. To give you a sense of the capacity or capability of these new artificial intelligence engines, a great example is what Google did a few years ago. They moved their translation engine off of their traditional platform onto an artificial intelligence platform. Overnight, the translation engine improved more than it had over its lifetime previously. These new engines can take data and with machine learning and the new capabilities that they have, bring together data sets in different ways and insight out of that data in different ways that we think is going to be powerful over the next couple of years in this industry. If you look at the 4 elements that we talk about there, so 1, new sources of data readily available, and it's reliable data. So Uber, a couple weeks ago, announced that they were going to make their traffic data available, Waze making their traffic data available, forecast data, telematics, understanding where and very accurately how goods are moving and people are moving around a city. Combined with this inventory proximity, where I now have the goods much closer to where I need to deliver. I'm able to orchestrate on a much more micro scale and only a city instead of a nation. Combined with this predicted demand, as retailers get better at understanding where the next purchase will occur. Another good example outside of this sector of how artificial intelligence can drive that prediction is what Uber's doing, where they're predicting where the next rider will come from based on the data that they have, and they're telling their drivers where to stage themselves to pick up the next rider. As I heard this the first time, I thought, how are they possibly doing that? But as you look at it, my usage of Uber is fairly predictable. If around noon I'm taking an Uber to a restaurant, then about an hour and a half later I'm going to want one to come back. They're using that data to start to be very predictive in where demand will come from, and retailers are starting to do the same thing as they start to understand where that content will enter the network. And then the last is this crowdsourced labor availability. One of the things that we're finding is that consumers are expecting or demanding deliveries later and later in the day, and that 5 to 9 p.m. window is becoming a prime time for delivery. That's also when the crowdsourced labor seems to be most abundant, as these people get off their day job and then decide to earn a few dollars in the off times and start to do some deliveries in those non-peak times. So you combine all that together, and now we've got a model that can take a lot of the non-value added tasks out of the delivery experience. And so instead of a truck leaving from the sortation center with 300 parcels delivered, doing their rounds and coming back, we see a driver raise their hand and say, all right, I'm ready to start doing some deliveries. And using the orchestration of the engine, they get the first assignment, which is to go to a shopping center and pick up 10 parcels, and then they'll deliver 3, and then they'll pick up 4 more, and then they'll deliver 6, and then they'll pick up 8 more, and then they'll deliver 2. And what it creates is these micro continuous hubs where they can do a continuous loop of delivery because it's localized, because it's orchestrated, and because it's very efficient. That changes the cost model. And what we believe, as we've looked at this, is that artificial intelligence has the opportunity to radically reduce and shift that delivery reality. As we talk with startups in this space and the artificial intelligence engines that are out there and talk through this, it's surprising that universally they're saying, we can do this. We could do this today, and we're working with a few in the startup space that are actually starting to pilot these sorts of capabilities. It's not that far off to be able to orchestrate that level of efficiency. The second is what we call the customer genome, and the customer genome is about gathering a wide array of data about the consumer so that you not only understand their preferences, but you can explain the why of their behavior. And when you've got that data and the ability to explain the why of their behavior, you can start to offer very different predictive services in a process that we call anticipatory delivery. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Today, if I've got the iPad I ordered, it's going to be delivered, and I've been given a delivery window, right? It'll be delivered between 3 and 4 at my house. I can see that it's raining outside, and with solutions that are out in the market today, I can hop on and do something about it. I can leave some instructions. I can say to hold it at the office or bring it the next day or those sorts of things. An anticipatory delivery experience is different. At 7 a.m. that morning, I get a text that says, your iPad's going to be delivered, and it looks like it's going to be raining when we're going to deliver it. Why don't we take it to the locker? And they pick the locker because that's where I would have redirected. And for my wife, they pick the neighbor. And for my neighbor, they pick the office because they know the behavior well enough that they can predict and anticipate what I would have done in that situation. When you get to that point, we believe that it actually reverses this curve, because now I'm eliminating the non-value added cost of the attempted delivery. So instead of putting it out on that truck, getting a redirection order an hour before it's supposed to be delivered, and then I have to redirect to deliver to the locker or the neighbor or the office or whatever, if I can anticipate, then I eliminate all those costs. And the better I am at anticipating, at predicting and personalizing, the more efficient I am. And so instead of sending it out on the truck, I send it on the truck that's going to the locker, and I get it right the first time. And we believe that that changes and makes personalization a good level of investment. If you think about the combination of the experiences there of retailers and shippers, brands being combined, one of the things that we're finding is extremely important is that individualized knowledge of the consumer and being able to tailor that event is becoming much more important as they look for these sorts of experiences. The last area that we're looking at is autonomy, and I believe that it's going to be on ground before it's in air, but whichever you believe, we see this as transformative. Interestingly, if you were to ask the car executives back in 2014 when they thought autonomous vehicles were going to be mainstream, almost every one of them said 2025. If you ask them now, almost every one of them is saying 2020, and some of them are even starting to say earlier, in 2018 or 2019. Tesla will have an autonomous vehicle out mainstream by 2018. Nutonomy is testing autonomous driven taxis in Singapore and 6 other markets right now today. Uber is testing autonomous driven taxis in the US today. It's coming faster than you think, and as you take that labor construct out, it changes the cost model, obviously. On the drone side of things, I'm not sure that we'll clear the regulatory hurdles and where that's going to go, but if we are able to, our research says that we expect a drone delivery to be about 74 cents, contrasted with a 3 to 5 euro delivery that's occurring today. A drone company that we're working with, one of the startups, estimates that that'll be about 47 cents. And JD.com in China is using 500 drones a day to do deliveries, and they estimate that their drone delivery cost is about 8 cents. I don't know if any of those numbers are real when you get to do this at scale, because nobody's really doing this at scale yet. But what I do know is that as you take that labor out, those cost models go down significantly. Again, changing the curve. And if you think of a laborless delivery, the increase of speed or the increase of personalization, if you're talking about adding 2 or 3 cents to the delivery, then who cares? Why not? Right? Especially if it gives you a competitive advantage over other retailers in this sector. So where does this all go from here? There's 3 things that we think are important over the next few years to finish up on. The first is as delivery becomes seamless, we see the addressable market increasing. And that's clearly the strategy that Amazon is pursuing. They're not just about taking market share, but they're about increasing the number of people and the number of things that you shop for online. As you think about it, if I go online today and I can see that the shirt that I was looking to buy is going to be delivered same day, and if they can get that for enough of the goods, then I'm more likely next time I need something urgently to go online and shop. And that's their play, is increasing that addressable market. The second is we're seeing a lot of investment in elimination of friction in these transactions. And as the friction comes out, we see the growth curves turning. And in some cases, they may have taken too much friction out. For example, with what Amazon's done with the Echo, I can say, Alexa, order paper towels, and paper towels show up. But my 5-year-old can say, Alexa, order Legos, and Legos show up. And he knows it. We've had to turn it off because he'll walk in and just ask for things, and they magically show up. So maybe there's too much friction that's been taken out of the transactions, but if you think back to where we started of that 10x increase in online shopping and the 2x increase in online purchase, or mobile purchase, As you take that friction out of the mobile transaction, and as I'm much more able to buy in a very simple, frictionless way on my device, we see growth curves turning and changing fairly dramatically. And then the last is this concept as delivery becomes ubiquitous, as that reality that consumers are demanding of I can get it anywhere, anytime, any way that I want, at no or very limited incremental cost, we see that driving e-commerce growth and the transition away from brick and mortar onto an online platform. Thank you very much for your time. If there's any of this research that you're interested in receiving, you have my contact details here, and I'd be happy to send more along. Thank you.